This week has been one of those real operator weeks. Airports, campuses, conferences, conversations in motion. The kind of travel that reminds me of how fast this AI movement is actually moving in the real world. Today's episode is a bonus recording from the ASU Agentic Student Experience Conference. I had the chance to sit down live with Claire Zau for a deep conversation on Agentic AI. In this conversation, Claire explains AI in 3 stages. First, perception AI. These systems could recognize things but could not reason. Second, generative AI. These systems could create content but still needed guidance. And now, of course, we enter in Agentic AI. AI that can act, make decisions, and work on its own over time. Her message is clear. The real change is not faster tools. The real change is AI that can make progress by itself. So, think of this as a bonus room conversation recorded in the field, right at the edge of where the agentic future is starting to feel very real. Let's get into it. So, Claire, hi.
Hello.
We are at the ASU Agentic Student Experience Conference, right? And I think that one of the things I'd like you to riff and start expanding, you're an expert in this field, and you're an evangelist, a translator, like you're playing this role of here's state of the art, and then fuel it with investment, or translate it with charm and intelligence. So I hope you should put that in your LinkedIn profile, by the way.
Thank you.
But one of the things I'd like to ask you is, it feels like there's a shift from AI as, majority of the world knows it as a chatbot, and this thing that we define as agentic. So, hot take. What's agentic? Like, how do you define agentic AI versus not? And I just like to basically go there because I honestly believe that there's also an echo chamber, bubble, what do you want to call it, and the ones who jumped into agentic were that, like 1,000 people in the world, and we're just going so hard at it.
Yeah.
And now we're trying to bring everyone to this agentic world. So what's agentic? What's agents? Can you just kind of help us describe that?
I mean, super valid question. I think, honestly, the AI world doesn't even have a consensus around what the definition is, and they're the ones who are talking about building it. But I think of agents as really just kind of this next evolution of AI. We had a presentation earlier, but we talked about how AI really moved from what we saw for the last 20 or so years of perception AI, these systems that are able to help us sort through information through, whether that's text or speech.
Multimodal, right?
Yeah, really just classifiers. And we had Siri, we had Alexa, but these weren't able to reason. They didn't really think on their own. And then recently we've had generative AI. I think that's probably been when people think AI, that's what they think of. They think of AI slop, unfortunately, but they also think of ChatGPT and text interfaces.
And by AI slop, you refer to this body of work of, it produces a ton of things, but that last mile, if you don't do it, it's crappy. It's not great, right?
Yeah, just AI output. There's just so much. It's a tsunami of AI content.
Yeah.
And so I think this next phase, what we're entering, people have started coining as agentic. And that's kind of a confusing term. I also, sometimes I'm like, I don't think my definition of agents is the same as your definition of agents. But ultimately what I just think of it as, let's give AI the ability to act, to do, and to independently do so without handholding. So I think of a lot of, you might ask, why can't chatbots do this? Why can't, they're able to output and do the same actions. But what you'll notice is that for a lot of existing software, you can't let it sit. You have to handhold it through every step. You have to copy and paste context. You have to use multiple different tools. What agents do is actually piece together all those actions. So it can actually perform on your behalf. Sometimes they can perform on your behalf for multiple hours. So that's really what I see agents as, really when you take all that intelligence and give it the ability to do and act.
Like that. So there's a system of action, right? And this is where, in the definition of agentic, non-action, it's on the other side of AI. Action, you get these new capabilities emerging. Where do you see action as a workflow, and then like the whole aspect of automation? Can you just kind of, and happy to bring your GSV hat as you see portfolio companies. Right? What are the exciting things that you see in action, right? Because for me, it's all about end-to-end workflow, or what I call agentic workflow. But what is it for you? So, all right, if it's action, what are the exciting things that you see in action, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of it is taking some of the actions that we as humans have historically done with software and piecing that together with, and giving these units of intelligence instructions to do that same work. And so my very honest, as an investor who's looking at so many startups in this space, is I've been a little disappointed with how few companies have actually successfully shifted to this conversation around agents. It feels like a lot of startups today are still very much so focused on, let's do what we've been doing for the last 20, 50 years, but just make it faster, cheaper, better. Let's just make AI generate lesson plans faster. Let's make AI generate emails faster. And that's great. And it's exciting. It saves a lot of time. But it's not necessarily I still have to sit by the computer and tell it what to do. And so I actually think there's a lot of opportunity for certain startups to actually move beyond this and go into the space where, if you think of even just what OpenAI launched 2 days ago now, they launched Atlas, which was their browser. And I think, that's not necessarily an ed tech startup, but it's indicative of this new paradigm we're entering where these systems are ambient. They are not just a separate app like ChatGPT or Gemini. Rather, they are able to navigate our systems as we do, as humans do, and click through things. They're able to scroll. They're able to copy and paste. Being able to give them computer using action. And a lot of the AI labs have focused a lot on this. That's been a big push recently. It was a big unlock when Anthropic announced Claude had computer use, and all the big AI labs follow suit. So I think that's another element, is really the ability to actually give them not only this workflow planning, but also the ability to actually use computers to execute on those actions.
Let's go in this direction of what this new version of AI, agentic, action-driven, ambient, if anything, mutations outside, in-app. One of the exciting things that I find on the AI ecosystem is how you look at the action surface, right?
Yep.
Against the systems of record. So now these things connect to CRMs and SIS and ERPs and all type of things. So the data object increases significantly. So all that to ask you the question of student experience.
Yeah.
So I just find that there's a new world of the experience that emerges, right? And I'm a bit of a skeptic of when we come to this conference and we speak about a student experience.
Yeah.
And, half of us don't understand what that experience looks like because, I'm going to use your word, it's ambient.
Yeah.
Browsing technologies. I don't even know what that means, but there's an experience that it's going to emerge and it's going to be very different. As per ChatGPT research, not only if you live in Hong Kong, Singapore, you're like, fencing athlete at Stanford, or you have this very rich international, multi-geographic, multi-discipline experience, my friend. How do you see experience emerging? I'm skeptic that someone today can come and say, this is the experience and what's going, when we just basically are grounded by an experience that is mediated by a technology that we don't even understand is emerging. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, I think acknowledging that every single person comes to a university experience brings so many different things. And I think for me, I actually went into the university experience feeling a little bit like I had already had a mini version of that. I mentioned to you earlier before this podcast that I went to boarding school, and it was pretty much a preview of college. It really gave me what I wanted out of a college experience, which was the ability to be in these small classrooms, to engage thoughtfully with others and be challenged. And you're there to learn. But I think what I found with the university system is that it often becomes it's not even learning at its core. It often becomes this admin experience. How many courses can I check off in order to graduate? There's all these different aspects that make it much more administrative than it needs to be. And so I think, as I think about this next evolution of this technology and these complete paradigm shifts in how we interact with technology, I don't think the university experience should be as complicated as having to go to one website for this thing and go to another website for this thing. And it feels like there's, as opposed to focusing on the learning itself, we've been inundated with all these technologies. And I pull this from the dating world, but they talk about how, and you often see a lot of technologies evolve first in gaming and dating and toys. And what you're seeing is actually people are completely bypassing the traditional interface itself. So there's all these.
By that you mean like the interface, the
no
UX?
swipe, no swipe.
Okay.
You call, and the system does all the work for you on the back end, agentically. It has a collection of all the humans that it can match.
Where you're going with this.
Yeah, and so as opposed to thinking of let's give more people more interfaces and more web pages and more chatbots, instead it distills it back to like, let's actually think about what we were here to do. And in the case of dating, it's like, I want to meet another person.
Yeah.
And so you just call and you say, here's what I'm looking for. And it says, and then the system, checks that against what sits on the back end. And it comes up with 3 matches for you based off of that. And it's all voice mediated. And you can see a world how that moves to networking, or even you're already seeing that in the higher ed world. Why do I need to go on endless sequences of pages of looking at tables? Like I think really rethinking the human computer interface, because we have now for the first time ever, we don't have to interact with humans through points and clicks and scrolls and keyboards. You can actually just talk to a computer for the first time. So I think as I think about the user experience or student experience changing, I think there's a much more dynamic way to interact with the institution.
I was telling you before that it was fascinating to hear one of our partners and how, as they define successful agentic, it's staff augmentation type of place, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, now I'm able to do more resolutions and my staff doesn't have to pick up the phone, AI does it. That's great.
Yep.
But what you're talking about is something that is drastically different, right?
Yeah.
That through agentic AI, the student experience starts making leaps into time to value, because we know what the outcome is.
Yep.
So your examples on dating is, don't make me do the form and the swipe. That takes so much time. It just put me in a coffee shop with Mr. Handsome, Mrs. Handsome, or whatever you want to, we're interested in. And then that social interaction takes place.
Yep.
And I just need it to be done pronto, because I have other swipes, no pun intended, to do in my life that are not particularly an app. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think what's interesting is we've never been able to measure outcomes in software, and you actually now have a very you now have a very real, tangible way. It's like, it was the action completed or not? And so I think that is just such an interesting way of even just thinking about, like, how do you partner with software, and how do you evaluate what has a true ROI?
Before we go into ROI, a different version of ROI, the way you're thinking about it. You're a banker as well. Can I put you as a banker? Can I use that label?
Yeah, we manage money. Yeah.
Okay. So as an investor.
Yes, as an
banker,
investor.
someone who is responsible for identifying organizational capabilities and taking it to the next level. Where do you see the biggest lift in this student experience? Is it going to be on trying to silo the university into getting the student in enrollment management, sustaining the student, retention and whatnot, like taking him or her to graduation, or maybe inside the classroom, like the teaching pedagogy? I heard today a divide of pedagogy and everything else, right?
Yeah.
Where does Claire, the investor, think that there's the biggest lift, if anything? Or if I were to ask the same question differently, what kind of companies are you more excited to fund and take over? Yeah,
I mean, I said earlier today, I think big vision, I am excited about what AI can do to unlock scaled personalized learning and this vision of this 2 Sigma problem and everyone having a one-to-one tutor. But I actually don't think there are that many companies doing instruction well, like actually teaching.
It's so hard.
Yeah, it's a hard problem, because I don't even think, even Google is not with so much information on, your Gmail and all your other touch points of the Google interface. Even then, they don't have enough context to accurately diagnose like where you are as a learner and where you need to be. I think that's actually one of the things that people have misconceptions around in this belief that AI tutors will solve everything. Everybody's so fixated on the chatbot as this one-shot solution that's going to reduce all the differences in learning. But what they're not realizing is that it's never really been a lack of information problem. It's always been how to navigate it. So I need help. I know what I want to learn, but I don't want to have to watch 200 YouTube videos. I need to just have someone tell me, you are here, you have this timeline, you need to learn these things to get to point B. And I think that's what AI can do, but there are missing elements like memory, the context graph, or the knowledge graph around this student. So I think for me, it feels like instruction, I'm excited about that, on the 5 to 10 year horizon, but I don't think we're there yet in truly delivering on what we want to do. The first two that you mentioned, I actually think that's where there is a lot more opportunity.
Short, medium term.
Yeah. And I mean, even long term as well.
I mean, that's where our company is at, so I hope you're also right. I know you're right.
Yeah, and I think it's because at the end of the day, I even think of when you talk about a great learning experience, not that all the work that Element 451 is interfacing with isn't important, but I think when people talk about their student experience, they often remember the classes and the educators, right? They're not like, oh, I had a really great time talking to this one call center person to figure out my financial aid, right? That is part of it, and if they have a great experience, then it's great, but more often than not, they have a bad experience. And so I think in that sense, a lot of where I think AI can plug in is doing the stuff that students don't necessarily feel like are core to the learning part. Yeah. And so I also think there's just so much that you see as drop-off points within the first two that you mentioned, and it's because we can't scale human touch to that. And so if you can bring in a good solution that is 24/7 available and can actually execute, then students are going to, one, have a much better experience around applying, around staying, and then also have a much more better experience to focus on the learning part. It's kind of how I'm thinking about the space.
I could stay in this part of the topic for a long time, just 2 more minutes, but you're touching on something that I think it's really important. You gave the example of when was the last time you remember having this conversation with the financial aid counselor, right? And then, but they're part of the fabric, and all of us did it, and then we will remember. I do think I remember.
Yeah.
Good conversation and bad conversation. It's probably not top of mind, but AI, specifically Agentic, comes in and replaces that counselor and problem solve. Let's go to teaching. I think that what we're seeing here is more of the human problem. It's not a technology problem per se, right? But displacing a faculty member. Notice that we're not calling them online faculty members or virtual faculty members. We call them virtual tutors.
Yeah.
Somehow the knowledge diffusion is still human.
Yeah.
And call it the union card, professor, PhD, whatever you want to call it. And this is where, technology, human, culture, the human in the loop thing is still a barrier. And until that's solved, I don't see us, because I guess my point, and this is not a question, but more of a comment.
Yeah.
Until we figure out, I think that the biggest opportunity that we have is that Agentic AI owns knowledge infusion. Like, this is how we learn. Then professors and faculty, they start taking a different role. Is it coaches? Is it conversationals? I don't know what. There's going to be a different role.
Yeah.
And it's a hard one to push through academia because it's so ingrained.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the model of higher education for the longest time, the role was to, there are many roles that higher education serves, but one of them is to stuff knowledge in a human, right? And to build that codified knowledge. We're now entering a world where you will always want experts. However, there is no expert that can outsmart an AI model today, right? Maybe in certain domains or in like a hyper-specific case studies, you still have, handshake AI employing PhDs to data label because these models aren't there yet.
Sure.
But I do think the value proposition is no longer I went to this university and I stuffed as much knowledge in myself as anymore. And so I think in that sense, when you enter this new age, the role does evolve. You are no longer just a deliverer of knowledge. You are also, I think, a cultivator of judgment, a cultivator of creativity, critical thinking. And what does that mean? How do we get en masse this entire higher education faculty workforce to get from a place of just thinking about their role as I am stuffing knowledge in this student to prepare them to I am giving them creativity and the tools to succeed in an AI workforce where everyone has arguably elevated access to all codified knowledge.
Let's do a pivot on to probably how you spent a lot of your time as an investor, right, in managing a portfolio. I would say you're an expert on the path to return of investment, right? And I think you're very passionate about this topic on all things AI. So here's my preamble to go into strategy and ROI. From your world as an investor, thought leader, apparently also a social media influencer, my friend. I find that our higher education peers and experts are stuck in two places. One is, I don't trust it, and fairly so, right? There's still a lot of things that, you cannot trust, and you need to have your, red teams do whatever you need to do. That's one issue. But the other one is stuck in this collaboration, stakeholder meeting or advisory meeting, the AI council, and talking about AI. But what we know is adoption is the precursor of ROI, and if unless you do it, you're not going to come and be successful at it. The rate of failure is probably higher than the rate of success, in my opinion. And I could also throw one more dimension here. So talk about anything you want, but for me, it's the nature of the POC, the successful POC, is what gives you high propensity for ROI, right? Never mind how you measure ROI. That's a whole different podcast, in my opinion. But what say you, Miss Claire? This is so. How do we bring some of your brain of ROI into the campus, deployment of AI, agentic or not?
Yeah. I mean, recognizing it is a tricky time, right? There is this technology that on one side, a lot of people are saying, well, you hear all these questions about security and that's super fair. You hear a lot about metacognition and what AI is doing to people's brains, and that's also super fair. But I also think in this AI moment, and I tell everyone this, is the people you are doing the most disservice to by not making them at least aware about AI is the students themselves, because they're the ones that are entering this labor force that is ultra fixated on AI. Every single job post has AI embedded in it, and you might not like it and you might have thoughts on why it's good or bad, but I think ultimately the students that are going into the workforce will have to at least be aware of it, and maybe we give them the skills to equip it as much as or use it as much as they can. So I think there needs to be some mentality shift, and I think a focus away from just the cheating conversation. I think one thing I've seen a lot of is we're still talking about cheating when in reality there's no end to this whack-a-mole, right? I talked about that earlier, this company that raised $15 million from Andreessen, and their entire manifesto is just to cheat on everything. They have a system that is ambient and can take in all audio and video inputs and help you answer everything, even on a date. You can go through every technical interview with an AI that sits next to you and just says, here's what you should say back to the recruiter. Here's what you should type out. And so we exist in that world. Yes. Yeah, clearly. And so I think in that world, we really have to, one, shift the conversation away from just cheating, and two, recognize that the people we are disadvantaging are the students themselves. I think on a more granular level, as you think about these POCs and why it takes so long to adopt AI, I think you're seeing some of that struggle and tension also in enterprise, but a little bit less so. And I think it's because there is a lot of a kind of prosumer type motion within the workforce. So an interesting behavior, what you'll see is that a lot of people are averse to using ChatGPT in their enterprise accounts.
Sure.
And that's because they don't want their companies having visibility in what they're doing. But consumer usage, off the roof.
What is
exactly
800 million users a week?
Weekly active
10%
users.
of the population.
Exactly. And so there's this massive kind of story disconnect of people saying or the numbers are showing that people are clearly using this on a weekly, daily basis. But I think from an enterprise standpoint, sometimes they say, oh, we're not seeing usage or we don't see desire for this. And it's because I think for AI products, the reality is you're seeing the most unlock at the user level. And so, but the problem I think that exists in traditional enterprise or traditional higher ed is in order to unlock value, you have to sell at the enterprise level.
Sure.
But then ultimately, those users have to be aware of this product. And then only once those users unlock that AI value, then it kind of drives that return. And that's how all software works. But I think it's even more acute in AI. because there aren't really, I think, ways right now. A lot of, I think things like ChatGPT are really, you can only churn out as much use as people are educated about the tool and as they are exposed to it. So I think in that sense, that's where you're really seeing this tension. And I think generally there's just a hesitancy to introduce, like there's a sense of that there's some time. There's always more time to figure it out. We can always put together more councils, or we can put together more safety teams. And I think that's valid, but I would really emphasize that those are important actions, but to do it at high velocity, because this tech evolves at lightning speed and there isn't the luxury of time to create a team and wait 6 months. Like by the time you've done a 6-month analysis on a technology, that's already 3 models.
So I'm extracting a few patterns that I think are super interesting. You spoke about through the example of cheating, right? So there's these known problems that kind of we know they're there. So I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm hearing from you is like, that's it, kind of move on from it. There's more things. To layer that, there's this aspect, and I think your second point of everybody is using it, right? This technology, it's bottoms up, it's consumers first.
Yeah.
And so just more ammo to like just get over the hump.
Yeah.
When you get over the hump, you spoke about velocity. I think that's very important. Unfortunately, my academic peers and where I come from, we're just not known for that velocity, right? But it's really important. So those are the ingredients. What about, I want to do it, I'm fine. Like, and then are there things that you would advise from where you see it as, invested in companies or being a thought leader in this sector? You really know that, ed tech space. If I make the commitment to get over the hump and I say, okay, we're going to do it fast, is there some pragmatic, practical things that you would say, hey, President Bonilla, should have your team do X, Y, Z? What comes to mind there?
I mean, I definitely don't sit as much on the implementation side, but I do think at least interfacing with the startups that are selling to all of these clients or selling to this audience.
I like that.
I think ultimately the buyers hold the power here, right? And you know that. And I think oftentimes there are startups very transparently will sell you on a vision, but where the product is not where the vision is, right? And so I think
lot of noise. There's a lot of noise out there.
And I think it's okay to want to double check that and say, okay, sure, I love the big vision, I'm aligned, but also where is today's product? What can you show me in tangible terms? And I think the products that do the best and feel like I've seen succeed in partnering with universities and university stakeholders are ones that have been able to demonstratively show ROI, that they're able to make what is unknown known for the client. And so I think as much as, and we have a lot of technologists in our portfolio, they think about outputting product. They've written the code and a lot of times it's intangible, right, to a general audience. But part of making a great product is making sure that the end user recognizes the value that it's created. So part of why I think, for example, Duolingo is a great product is we always look at, and they have all these different tweaks that just make it the ultimate like consumer build product. But even just the fact that you can see your progress and see how you've improved from point A to point B is such a little thing, but it's very different from a Rosetta Stone textbook. And that's why people like it, is because I can visually, tangibly see I've learned 1,000 words. It's like Spotify Wrapped, right? And I know this is, these are tricky or small consumer tricks, but I think there's a lot to learn about bringing the consumer building mindset to the enterprise world, because, Spotify Wrapped, like they don't have to tell you how much music you listen to or who your favorite artist is. But one, it's a fun gimmick, but two, it also is this delivery of ROI and says, okay, actually at the end of the year, I listened to 20,000 minutes. Of course I can't cancel this, right? And so I think bringing that kind of that focus on return and focus on value delivery to the enterprise world, I think is an interesting tweak that startups frankly should make. And I think the buyers listening to this should hold them to that standard of like, how can you demonstrate and show me that you have delivered on what you're saying? What is the value here?
When the focus of getting over the hump, work with speed, goes into ROI, I think you're on the money. And what I'm getting from the conversation, right, is, as I try to translate to our stakeholders, is you need to use ROI as the outcomes, not the pursuit of the features. Look how cool this technology is. Like, in the school knows the outcomes, so please tell me how you're going to achieve those outcomes, and that's how you're going to end up in ROI. But there's something really interesting on your story in analogy to the Spotify Wrap, that there's a retrospective that takes place, and that journey and the destination, they're equally important. You get to the ROI, but how you got there, and this is what brings that product digital transformation, and then the replicability of the process, right?
Yeah.
I like that very much.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot to learn from the consumer world on how to build great products that people love, because I think sometimes in the enterprise world, it's you sometimes think, okay, my stakeholder doesn't have to love, my end user doesn't have to love this for me to, as long as I'm providing use to the top leadership, this is okay. But I really think the best enterprise companies I've seen that have sold to higher ed or sold to enterprise are ones that kind of have a little bit of a consumer DNA and have delivered delightful experiences, even if it's not a traditional consumer user.
Gotcha. I promised the last question, so I let you go, and I'm sure you had a really, really busy day, so you deserve your drink or your nap. I got a pick of your brain today, and it's fascinating. 100 slides in 30 minutes in your keynote, and there were probably 65 showcases and use cases that you demonstrated. Which out of all those is the one technology you cannot wait to get home and like play with?
Ooh, that's a tough question.
I know, right?
There are so many.
What are you the most excited about nowadays in all these bells and whistles?
I think it's not as personally related, but I'm actually really excited to see this kind of acceleration of the scientific discovery flywheel.
Oh, really?
And it's not a personal thing. I don't think I I will personally benefit from medical breakthroughs and scientific discoveries, but I feel like in a time when a lot of AI headlines are quite negative, and there's reasons for it to be negative, like, you have OpenAI very openly embracing erotica, or XAI also doing the same. And so there's reasons to have those headlines, but it's also fun to get headlines and see demos of products that are literally changing the trajectory of our society and humanity itself, and almost more like the positive angle. And so I think it's not necessarily something I can try at home, definitely not. But I think out of all the different demos of what's possible, between wearable telepathy headsets to agentic browsers to Sora 2, I actually think what I feel like is the headline people should focus on is this technology is going to, what I hope to net benefit society. And there will be a lot of uncomfortable things. I think we will have to navigate that, and I hope we do that responsibly. But I actually think nice headlines where we see that, we're making breakthroughs in cancer therapy pathways and actually having real outcomes. I think a lot of people have talked about the promise of what AI can do for science and for medicine and for technology, but now we actually have some early signals of what that could look like. So yeah, not something I would be able to play with, but I think out of all the headlines, that's one I would focus on.
Fascinating. Yeah. Thank you so much, Claire.
Yes,
Safe travels and go New York.
Yes.
Thanks for listening to Higher Intelligence. This show is part of the Enrollify network, home to the largest collection of podcasts in higher education. Enrollify is where higher ed goes to grow. You can find more podcasts, webinars, videos, blogs, and more. Visit Enrollify.org and subscribe to get new content sent directly to your inbox. Enrollify is brought to you by Element 451, the AI agent platform for higher education. Learn more at element451.com.